Warning: the episode you are about to listen to most likely contains graphic language, details of violence and murder, and may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. What's up, everybody?
Hi guys, welcome to 2021.
Welcome to Murder with My Mother, first of all. And also 2021. That's so exciting that it's 2021. So different.
Very, very futuristic.
Yeah, 6 days in, we have like the Capitol Hills getting taken over by the biggest hillbillies in the world. Oh my god.
Yeah, if anybody was expecting 2021 to magically turn into the year that saved 2020, well, you'll be disappointed.
Honestly, no, I think it's going to be like a funny year and there's going to be better stuff that happens. But I mean, Trump was impeached again. So what kind of a president gets impeached twice? Him, obviously.
A Trumpy one.
Yeah. So yeah, 2021. Woo! New Year's was fun. A lot going on there on my couch. There wasn't a whole lot, but
I think I was sleeping by 10:30 p.m.
Yeah, so you just snored your way right into 2021.
Yep.
I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, very relaxed.
Huh. Well, thank you guys for coming back. We have our second part of Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. We were Really, Mom? You didn't put your phone on
That's
silent?
yours! Asshole!
I'm like, Mom, we're recording. You didn't put your phone on silent. Why wouldn't you do that?
I, of course, put my phone on silent.
Oh, well, anyway, I didn't. Sorry, I'm an asshole. Now it's on vibrate. So, okay. Anyways, yeah, so we hope you guys had a really great new year and that you're having a super entertaining 2021 so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just trying to be hopeful. I don't know. Positive energy.
I think there'll be a lot of good stuff that materializes this year. At least it's not going to be the whiplash shock of there's a pandemic and everything else. Hopefully nothing new and surprising arises because I feel like I just jinxed us.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
There's not even wood around. I'm looking. Again, we are back with the second episode of the infamous Green River Killer. And we were just getting into it being, the numbers are crazy. The numbers, even in the beginning part of his murder spree, is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, by the time we left, it was mounting up pretty fast.
Yeah. And so the number of missing and murdered women continued to grow at an alarming rate. And I mean, it didn't stop. It never stopped. He wasn't caught till 2001.
Yeah, so he had a long, long reign of terror.
Yep. So here is how that long reign of terror thankfully ended. By this time, the number of missing and murdered women continued to grow at an alarming rate. Through most of the mid-80s, the state of Washington was in a constant fear because of the Green River Killer and all the women that were going missing.
And there was, of course, the task force that had been organized to investigate, but they were just missing him every single time.
Yeah, they couldn't catch a break. They couldn't get on his tail. They couldn't find evidence. And the evidence they did collect, they couldn't do anything with it because of the time of when it was. It was not in the 80s. DNA wasn't a real thing. It was there, but they didn't know what they could do with it to catch anybody.
Yeah, it was basically just blood typing and stuff like that. It wasn't like it is now.
No, they would say like this killer has type O, and it's like, okay, how many, even if it's the rare blood type, how many people have that blood in an area? You can't just go based on that. Obviously you need, now we're in the days where you even have familial DNA, where it's like if your fifth cousin does ancestry DNA and you murdered somebody 40 years ago and they run the DNA and they're like, wow, this person's fifth cousin, it hit on that genetic screening that they're related by that, or, just as an example.
It's pretty crazy these days compared to then. And they basically had to catch people pretty much red-handed or with a witness account, or else it was mostly circumstantial evidence that they had.
Well, and even a lot of witness accounts back then turn out not to even be true, right? So although Gary had been interviewed in 1983 and he even passed that polygraph in 1984, he came again kind of onto the radar because he was the last person seen with two of the people that were missing, two of the victims that were found murdered. So he was the last person to have been seen. So obviously,
But they also knew that he was quite a customer of the sex workers down on the highway. So that was also circumstantial. Even though they had a little niggle about what he was doing, they couldn't prove it.
A little what?
Niggle.
I have never heard that. What is that word?
It's an 80s word.
Are you just sticking with the theme or damn? The co-host has got to be on, like, I don't know what. Okay, anyway, so.
There you go. Millennials.
All right. Well, we gonna learn today. But this time, in 1987, they were a little more suspicious of him because, again, he had been seen with two of the victims found. He was the last person. He frequented sex workers. He was kind of a weird guy.
His truck was the last one seen, remember, with the girl that was struggling.
Becky Marrero, yeah.
And when did they look in his house?
So what happened was first, they kind of on their own, they looked at his credit card statement. They looked at where he worked in distance to where he lived, and then kind of, calculated how much regular mileage he would be accumulating. And they said it was like so much more than logically it would be. Like he was driving around, obviously
a lot,
right? So in 1987, in April 8th, 1987 is when they searched the home and vehicle of him.
Oh, so they really, really suspected him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People at his work called him Green River Gary for years because it was almost like a joke because he had been questioned early in the 80s and people were aware that he had been questioned, so they started calling him Green River Gary,
Gary Smith? No, Green River
Gary. Green River Gary, but it really was Green River Gary. God. But if someone's like creepy and you make that kind of joke about them, but it really ends up to be true and you just worked on the paint line with this man that is really Green River Gary.
I can't even imagine. That must have been so trippy after he was arrested.
Well, another thing that came out to do with his workplace was he would actually, because he would take victims' jewelry, and that's another thing that came out is when they would try to look, they would canvass the areas that they found the clusters of bodies in.
Yeah.
And they started to, they would try to look for all the belongings of these victims or anything to piece it together. So they always, the women that were murdered, some of their family or friends or, other people that had known them would say, oh, she always had this ring on, she always had this bracelet, she always had, whatever.
An identifying factor.
Exactly. But they never would find any of that stuff. Even if someone just went missing and they're like, no, she had this pendant on.
Butterfly necklace.
Whatever, yeah. They could never find any jewelry. So it came out later that he was leaving the jewelry in places at work so that people would find it. And I guess he worked with a bunch of people, Kenworth. He would work with a bunch of people that were dishonest and steal things that they just found. But they would put them on. So girls around the workplace would be wearing these rings. And he would get a rush because obviously they don't know whose ring that is or whose belonging that is, but he did. And again, like we always talk about with their weird
trophy stuff. Yeah. That's such a creepy way to get turned on. That chick's wearing that ring. She doesn't know about the prostitute that I murdered and have sex with a dead body later.
It came out later too because his neighbors were like, he would always have garage sales and he would always have women's jewelry for sale and women's shoes and women's clothes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Reminds me of my ex-husband.
He was pretty creepy though. So what happened after this was because they were onto him and he knew, obviously they just searched his house. But he's got to be a little cocky because, like I said, they searched his house they questioned him in 83, let him go. Questioned him in 84, let him go. 87, searched his house, searched his car, let him go.
Isn't that so weird? If I were the one that was being questioned that many times, I would be so nervous and such a wreck. And I bet you $1 million he was just calm and dopey. Yeah,
because he
had horseshoes up his ass because they never found anything that they could use.
Well, and if you think about it, I think it's that urge, because I wouldn't, if I knew I was under such a microscope, or that even if they had any inkling that it was me, I wouldn't be doing it. I would wait until it wasn't as suspicious, because obviously if they're watching you or you think they're onto you, you should probably stop. But the urge he had, it was, I guess, so strong that he just continued to murder dozens and dozens of women through the years.
Yeah, and especially at that time when they had the task force set up and they were looking at him so...
Well, he was only one of like 46 people that they like suspects that they had. So there must be a lot of creepy people living in the northern state of northern Washington, because that's a lot of people to have on a list.
I think there's actually a lot of creepy people living everywhere that we don't know about.
That is true. Yeah. And so because of this, Gary, I mean, this is smart. He started to change his MO, because before it would be these, nude bodies were found in clusters out in the open. And what he started doing was going into places where he didn't think anyone would go. So the bodies were not being found anymore. Because he was burying them now, which must have been hard because, like we said,
he's a necrophiliac.
Yeah,
so that took that part of the pleasure away for him.
Which must have been hard if that is something that he would like. Yeah, we'll get back to that because that's just a whole other can of worms. Literally, yeah. So Gary even started disposing of the bodies in places that had a lot of garbage already, or areas that were kind of overthrown with a lot of stuff to kind of throw investigators off, because they wouldn't know what to collect and what not to collect. Yeah, by 1988, more than 50 women had vanished.
Holy smoke.
Yeah, and again, like I said, he changed his MO, went further into the woods, kind of to avoid being found, and so that he could revisit them, but he would know that they were there, and it would be a place where not a lot of people would, there wouldn't be high traffic areas.
Yeah, because a lot of the people previously, I mean, in the shows I've seen, he actually would just leave girls in empty lots by the airport and stuff like that. Those women were barely hidden in the beginning.
No, and that one I was watching when we were doing the research for this, and one of those girls was 8 months pregnant.
Yeah.
That was left behind the airport. And it's again, a corpse behind the airport, and it's a high traffic. It's a very populated city.
Yeah, but it just happened he would find the little pockets where there was empty lots and lots of garbage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No lights.
So again, although detectives had their eye on Ridgway, there was nothing they could do, because everything they had against him they had no efficient evidence against him. They only had circumstantial evidence, which they probably had for multiple people, because, I'm sure most people fit that as well. Constantly picking up prostitutes, having records, having all the things that they kind of were told to look out for. Other people obviously had that as well. So he wasn't as high on the suspect list as I would have liked him to be, but I don't know.
So after 1998, then how many more people?
Well, okay, so 1988, remember we talked about in the last episode, he met and married Judith. So Judith now moved in, and he was committing most of his murders in his home before, which is why there was no carpet, remember?
Yes,
so he married Judith, and that's when he got smarter about it. I think my personal opinion is it was one extra reason for him not to get caught, now that he had a wife that he loved, because he was it was almost spitefully killing these prostitutes because he had such a bad first breakup, divorce.
Well, both of his previous divorces were so hurtful to him, and his third marriage was actually, they both say it was like a match made in heaven. They were in love with each other, they got along super well, they didn't fight.
Yeah, so
she said the only thing that happened that was kind of even a little bit weird was that he would say he was going to be late coming home a couple times, and not even all the time.
Yeah, so the police weren't finding as many bodies through the years.
Yeah.
So what happened was, bodies were still turning up, but the task force, because that's a lot of money to put into something that nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Right? They're putting all this money into the funding, and they're exhausting their efforts, and nothing's coming from it. So that must have been super frustrating.
And I think they said between 1988 and 2001, there were only 11 victims compared to how many there were in the years previous to that.
82 through 84, there was 40?
40.
Yeah. So you can see that clear pattern of now, to me, that screams, I'm happier. Obviously, he has this sickness where he has to do this.
They say that serial killers that just stop because for a while they thought he had just stopped.
Or died.
Yeah, they thought that he had either died or moved to another area or something like that.
Yeah, and they actually thought for sure he was dead because there's no way this guy's gonna murder 40 women in like less than 2 years and then just be like, anyway, wipe their hands of them. Yeah. So in 2001, because what had happened from 1988 to 2001 is it pretty much became a cold case. Obviously, it kind of lived in the shadow of Seattle and northern Washington because, okay, someone just came and killed like 50 people and then was like...
And was never caught.
Disappeared.
Yeah.
So are they here? Are they somewhere else doing this to other women? Are they just hiding? Are they in jail? Are they, all these things. But by 1992, the task force dwindled, right? Because that's 10 years of, well, he started in 82 and it's 92 and they have no idea. And now for the last couple of years, it's like we said, since he got married in 88 to 92,
there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
There's definitely not a reason to hold that many officers investigating something that's not even occurring.
No. So it went from having like 30 officers, 50 officers at one time to now just having one officer. So Detective Tom Jensen was the only detective on the Green River Task Force by 1992.
Yeah. It's so mind-bending because although we think we know the usual patterns of someone that commits serial murder, obviously they can all kind of change it up a little bit, right?
Yeah. So in 2001, cold case unit went in and kind of reinvestigated this. Now they knew that they had advances in DNA technology so they could test the DNA that they had. So what had happened with all the victims is there were stones found in almost all of their vaginas. And what this had done, which, okay, yeah, you're a sick fuck and you're just putting stones in a woman's vagina, but joke's on you because it's actually holding onto your DNA.
Yeah, so it's acting like a plug, right?
Yeah, so his semen would be inside of the bodies that he just murdered and raped. And then, again, to humiliate them or whatever, he would put a stone inside. And obviously the officers, when, this was happening over 20 years, that would kind of be their linking...
That's so creepy.
It is. It would be their linking kind of factor, right? And the one we discussed last time was almost to just throw them off. The one with the fish and the wine and all that was also not even someone that was a sex worker. That was someone that worked at a restaurant. And so he obviously saw her and wanted to kind of throw them off his trail. So he tried to switch up his MO. But because of the first 4 victims did have the stone in there and it kind of held onto the DNA, that's what they were able to take and keep and put in a refrigerator. And in 2001, they still had that stuff in there.
How forward thinking of them, though. I guess we all kind of, especially the investigators, are taught what's about to come out in the future. Mm-hmm. However, it must have seemed like pretty far away. And then imagine at the point that you're ready to plug that DNA profile into a computer and wait to see what's going to come up.
Yep. So what they did was the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab tested the DNA found on Marcia Chapman. And this was 19 years later. So it's been sitting in there for 19 years. And they also tested the DNA evidence found on Carol Christensen. So both of these, they had spermatozoa, which is semen inside of them. And they were able to keep this and test this. And they ran it. And they also had those buccal swabs, remember, because when Gary was questioned in 1984, he gave a buccal swab.
Yeah.
Remember, they took hair and stuff from him, and they just put it on the shelf, just like they...
I know.
Yeah. But good thing they did, because they tested it, and surprise to nobody, I think, on the task force. I think they were all pretty... Even the people at work, Green River Gary, like...
Yeah,
ding,
right?
ding, 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 like, spot on.
I mean, you don't even think that you're that spot on, I don't think. It's like, it had to be a little surprising just to know that you knew the whole time and couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, really. And think about, he hid from them so well and, like, covered his tracks really well.
All for a man with a really very low IQ.
Super low.
It's like, just like a bumbling doom-da-doom.
And another thing, too, was, yes, DNA linked him. But another thing, like we mentioned, is he was a truck painter. So you have to think he's in there all day for 30 years spraying the trucks. What happens? You get contact transfer. That's getting on your clothes.
Yeah.
That's getting in your car. That's getting on your shoes. That's getting everywhere. So samples of microscopic particles of paint that had been on almost all the bodies were also kept in evidence. And
they didn't really even know what they were.
No, they had no idea.
They were something that was on each body that was a similar thing, but they didn't know exactly what it was.
And that's why they kept it. Good thing, because good eyes on those cases. You have to think the people that are there collecting evidence. These towns are not that big. So think about how many people there are working, collecting evidence. It's probably the same person that's, going through all these sites and is like, what is this weird spray?
That's the part, like, that gets my heart beating fast, because I think about how it must have been to go to each deceased body and look and see, like, okay, this is the same, like, how creepy it was.
There's a stone in their vagina.
There's a stone in their vagina. There's a paint. There's this weird stuff on them. Like, this is the same sick fucker that's doing all of it. And to know that would be like, I would lose sleep at night. Obviously, they must have.
Well, in the videos and the interviews with the detectives and the people, the forensics, everyone involved, you can see it did take a toll on them because it was 20 years.
Yeah.
And
20 years of a nightmare.
And this person's pretty much taunting you because they're getting away, even if they're not doing it on purpose at this point, they're getting away with this for so long and getting even more, like,
complacent.
Yeah.
And imagine, like, after there hadn't been a body found for a long time and they thought he was dead or whatever, and then imagine the first one they found with the stone and the paint and all
my
that.
God. Their PTSD.
Oh my goodness.
So with all this new evidence,
they knew who their man was.
Exactly. The task force could now move forward and apprehend the most prolific serial killer at that time and
ever
to now in North America, at least. There's some crazy people outside of North America too. But they now had evidence that tied him at least to the 4 first victims. So they went to his house after he got off his shift at Kenworth, and they arrested his ass.
I think they actually arrested him at work.
They didn't.
Oh.
No, they arrested him at his house because all
when
his neighbors saw.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep. So Gary denied having anything to do with anything. He didn't know any of these people. He said, I did pick up sex workers and I did frequent sex workers, but I don't know about any of this other stuff.
And he told his wife, like, he had his wife completely fooled.
His whole family.
Yeah.
His brothers and their wives, and would bring their kids to the jail. And, like, they would all go visit, like, family.
And, like, free Gary. Like, these wrongly convicted, this man could never do something like that. And he played along with it very, very, very convincingly.
Free Gary is not one that I think was, after all this stuff came out, I mean, that's the thing. He denied and he protested his innocence while his family stuck by him and visited him, and he, proclaimed that he was innocent. But as the evidence started to roll in,
and there was a lot of it.
There was a lot because, again, they had saved and cataloged all this evidence. So they had only tied him to 4 right now, but 4 people. 4 murders, that's capital murder, right? So his lawyer said to him, look, you can sit here and say that you're innocent, but they have your semen inside 2 or 4
dead
bodies, and your paint from your truck, like from your job, unknowing to him, he didn't know he was doing that transfer. Like, that's probably something he was so mad about after when he realized, because he was very careful. They said, because remember, they searched his house and they didn't find anything. So he was really careful. And that's how he didn't get caught for so long, because he was careful. So,
It's crazy that someone that had such a low IQ could be so cagey.
Yeah. So he took, cagey, like that. He took his guidance of his legal counsel and admitted. Like, he agreed to a plea bargain.
That took the death penalty off the table.
And he said, look, if I tell you everything about every one of the women that I killed, all the ones I can remember, then because I killed so many that I have a hard time keeping them straight. So if I give you the details on all of them, will you take the death penalty off the table? And they were like, yes.
I don't understand that so much. Like, I guess most people are very, very, very afraid of the death penalty, but if I knew I was going to be in jail for that long, I would just rather have the death penalty.
And I'm sorry, but if you look at a death penalty case, you have like
Yeah.
2 appeals at least, and most of them are in jail for at least 20 years, past usually more than that.
Well, and also nowadays, the death penalty has been abolished in so many states
Yeah.
that their sentences are commuted over to life anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's good that he made that deal because then people could get some information on what happened to their loved ones.
Well, or where they were, because a lot of them, he changed his MO. They weren't being as easily recovered now because he wanted to keep them to himself. So he was burying them and no one was ever finding them. Now it was just missing women. People could obviously go from, okay, we're finding all these dead bodies to, oh, okay, now we're not finding any dead bodies, but all these women are still missing, right?
I mean, it was clear what was going on.
Yeah. So although he put up a bit of a fight in the beginning, he would eventually show investigators where he dumped the bodies and where he eventually started to bury them to avoid being found. But he did put up a bit of a fight in the beginning, like kind of like, no, I don't want it, like a brat. And they were like, look, we'll take your plea bargain away, your plea deal, if you don't stop it. And he was like, okay, and kind of gave in.
They talked to him like Mary, his mother.
Yeah, jeez.
But
domineering.
Who I feel the worst for, besides the families of the victims and obviously the victims, because what a terrible way to pass from your life. But poor Judith.
Yeah.
Judith really, really remained loyal to him and believed that he was being falsely accused. And she loved him. She thought they had the perfect marriage, and she said that on TV.
Yeah, she remained right by his side, but after he pled guilty to not just like 1 or 2 or 3, he pled guilty to 48 counts.
And she said when she listened to that, she was in court and she listened to him plead guilty to each one of them. And she said that was the most devastating moment. That's where she knew for sure.
Because it's like, it literally, he's like guilty. It's like in the murder of, this victim. And he's like, guilty. It literally is like if I said,
did you have mustard on your hot dog?
Guilty. It was literally like that. There was no, I am guilty of that. But there is no
it's where the psychopathy
emotion.
In, right?
There's nothing. It's like you're talking to him about what he ate for dinner. When he's discussing later, because like we said, he made a plea bargain where he would divulge information.
And boy, did he spill the beans.
Oh my goodness. So he started to talk about, like we said, saying the things about how he would kill the victims, about when he started, about why he did it. They have so many hours of footage of him with a psychiatrist trying to get to the bottom of why he did this, things he was feeling. He told them that he would always make the victims strip completely naked, and usually it was at his house or in his truck.
Yeah.
And he would make them strip completely naked. He would have a sheet down on his bed, and he would violently rape them from the back, which obviously they're being paid to have sex, but they must have been afraid, like that vibe, he's creepy. But another thing he would do, and he admitted, is he had pictures of his son all around his house, or in his wallet, or once he even picked up someone with his son in the car and then took her into the bushes, and then she never came out, and his son was like, where's that girl, Dad? Like, what happened? And he was like, oh, she lives close to her, she just walked home. Like, the poor kid.
Imagine now he's a man. Like, imagine what he's left with, even. Like,
oh, yeah.
Look at the amount of lives that were destroyed in the wake of the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway.
Yeah.
Destructo.
Well, you see, too, because he says, like we said, when they searched his house, they didn't find anything. But because he put that sheet down and he was very meticulous, so after he violently raped them from the back, they would... assume that's it, he's finished. But then he would reach up from a back around them and put them in a chokehold and choke them until they lost consciousness and died.
Yeah, he killed the majority of the women that he murdered with his forearm.
Yeah.
He did, in some circumstances, use a ligature.
Yeah.
Like their pantyhose or a belt or whatever, but mostly it was his own arm.
Yep. So on November 5th, 2003, Gary pled guilty to the murders of 48 women in that plea deal, and which took the death penalty off the table. So, yep.
They still have to go through a whole trial after
No,
that?
that was part of the plea deal. It was a plea deal, so he didn't get a trial, and he didn't die. That was his deal.
So I guess the families ended up getting answers somewhat because their victims' bodies were found, and then he could recount a lot of the details, but he couldn't really say which one was which. He said there was so many that he didn't remember the details of each one. He just remembered where they were buried.
And sometimes not even. He had a hard time keeping them all straight. He didn't ever pay attention to things about his victims. He said when he was being interviewed that they were just pieces of garbage to him, and he didn't care. He didn't think about it, like who they were or anything like that. And so the victims' families obviously did get some answers, but you can think about how angry these people are and how, there's so many emotions, and sitting there in the courtroom listening to him just be like, guilty, guilty, guilty. Like, he's literally just like, it's no big deal. He's guilty 48 times. The judge reads each name and he's just like, guilty, guilty.
And there were more than that.
Oh, yeah.
That it's suspected that there were almost double that amount of women.
Well, he said that.
Yeah.
He said, honestly, these are the ones I can find, but there's more, and I can't really remember.
I think he said that there's around 70
90.
To 80. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know. So it just gets worse and worse, and because those are the ones only that they could find. So those are the ones that were linked to him. So he sat in court, like we said, and he said 48 times guilty. So on December 18th, 2003, he was sentenced to life in jail without a chance of parole.
Thank God.
Yeah. But the families got a chance to speak and kind of give their victim impact statements. And the whole time, like, people were ripping him new ones, like telling him he's going to go to hell and
we hate you,
you ruined our lives, which, I get that, right? And especially because he caused so much, like, that's a lot of people to kill.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people affected. And a lot of these women were mothers, daughters.
Mass murder.
Yeah. Over 20 years.
Yeah.
And so he didn't even bat an eye at any of these people, like, literally sitting there and, like, giving it to him. And then one man stood up, and he was one of the victim's fathers, and he said, this big long speech of, like, it says that we're not supposed to hate anybody and we're supposed to forgive them, so I do forgive you. Oh, and Gary Ridgway started bawling his eyes out.
Oh.
Yeah. So he started crying, and then afterwards he got to address the families, and he said, I'm sorry for killing these ladies. They had their whole lives ahead of them. I'm sorry for causing so much pain to so many families.
Huh.
So, I mean, I don't know if that was overly heartfelt, because obviously it's like, okay, again, we are back to this. Are you sorry because you're really sorry? Or are you sorry because you got caught?
I think personally that he was probably triggered. That man that said he was forgiven spoke of the Bible and of God and all of that. And as we know, Gary was at some points in his life fanatical about religion. So I think that could have stirred a little something. If there was something to be stirred in him, it was often sometimes stirred with religion, which is like a set of rules, I guess, that he chose not to abide by generally.
Yeah. Well, and remember we said he did start to come into religion, and he got weird and like
he gets sermons and cry. Sermons.
Yeah, he would.
That's a French word for sermon.
Oh God, we know how you are with your French, so I'll take your word for it.
Boulet. After his conviction, Gary Ridgway lived in virtual isolation at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, Washington. And a lot of the privileges that were common to many of the prisoners there were denied to him just simply because they wanted to keep other prisoners from murdering him.
Keep him safe. He deserves it.
Yep, that's what they do with the high-profile ones.
Yeah, like you said that. They should just let...
They should let natural progression occur in jail.
Yeah, natural selection. You decided to be a criminal, so come hang with the big boys and, like, let's see what's going to happen to you.
Definitely.
Not that other criminals are big boys, but, like... you can strangle all these women, but you can't you're scared to be alone with,
Can't go to the lunchroom.
Exactly. On December 21st, 2010, Becky Marrero's remains were found in an Auburn ravine. The site is roughly 3 miles from the Mountain View Cemetery where Ridgway disposed a lot of his victims.
Oh, really?
Yes. So February 7th, Ridgway is charged with aggravated murder in connection to Marrero's slaying, which he pled guilty to. So that was 49 counts.
The one thing that I will say about Gary is that there was no reason that he had to plead guilty for that after the fact. He was already sentenced to the other stuff and he knew he wasn't going to get the death penalty. So I'm actually really happy that he did plead guilty and gave people some answers finally.
Yeah, and he was one of the most prolific serial killers. And not to say, because people like Ted Bundy and people like the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, the way that they killed their victims is so brutal and horrible. So people assume, but it's like, this man took out almost 100 women. And he did it while he's just working at the Kenworth paint shop and married 3 women. And
Heidi-o.
Yeah, la la la, like just painting a truck and killing some prostitutes. Yeah, and then just was able to go along with his life. And
very strange.
In May of 2015, Ridgway was transferred to a maximum security federal prison in Florence, Colorado, where they thought that because he wasn't from Colorado and this case didn't happen in Colorado, that he would be less recognizable to the inmates and in turn feel safer and have more freedoms, and he could kind of move with the general population.
That's so fucked up that they're even considering that.
So Dave Reichert, who was now he's the sheriff, but he was the head lead detective on the Green River Task Force for how many years?
Yeah.
He pretty much said the same thing as you. Because it cost $20,000 for a private plane used to transfer him to this prison.
He should have just been left to rot in a cell, even if it was by himself.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit if he fits in better with the general population of the prison?
Well, and you murdered almost 100 people. You've been hanging out. It's time to be by yourself now, because clearly when you hang out with people, look what happens.
You kill them.
Yeah. So because of the public outcry, his new privilege and relatively easier confinement, he was moved back to Walla Walla in October of 2016. God. So he had a good, nice ride for a year where he was out. And these people have been in prison. They're not going to really know who he is. And they're in Colorado and you don't really pay attention. I mean, people like us would pay attention and be like...
Word travels, though, eventually.
Yeah.
They have TV and stuff.
Exactly.
And Facebook.
Yeah. Well, they do. And they have dating profiles
I know.
And stuff. Yeah.
Oh.
Although Gary was charged with only 49 murders, there is speculation that he is responsible for near 90.
Oh, sickening.
that was a good word. That was quick on the fly. Sickening. That is sickening. So that's a new murder with my mother word, I guess. Sickening. Yeah. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to take the time and read out all of the victims that we do know Gary Ridgway was responsible for taking their lives.
We'd like to give a bit more information, just because so much of the information is generally given to the person that perpetrates the crimes, but the people that were taken from us are really the most important ones in the story.
And we would love to keep their memory alive, and we are glad that he got justice finally, and we are glad that these victims somewhat had justice and were able to be returned back to their families. Wendy Lee Caufield was 16 years old and her body was found July 15th, 1982.
Giselle Ann Lavorne was 17 and her body was found September the 25th, 1982.
Deborah Lynn Bonner was 23 and her body was found on August 12th, 1982.
Marcia Faye Chapman, 31. Her body was found August 15th, 1982.
Cynthia Jean Hines, who was 17, was found August 15th, 1982.
Opal Charmaine Mills, 16 years old, found August 15th, 1982.
Terry Renee Milligan, 16, body found April 1st, 1984.
Mary Bridget Meehan, 18, found November 13th, 1983.
15-year-old Deborah Lorraine Estes was found May 30th, 1988.
Linda Jane Rule, 16. Her body was found January 31st, 1983.
Denise Darcel Bush, 23 years old, and her body was found June 12th, 1985.
Shonda Leah Summers, 16 years old, found August 11th, 1983.
Shirley Marie Sherrill, 18. Her body was found June 14th, 1985.
Rebecca Becky Marrero, 20 years old. Her body was found December 21st, 2010.
Colleen Renee Brockman, who was 15 years old. Her body was found May 26, 1984.
Sandra Denise Major, 20 years old, found on December 30th, 1985.
Alma Ann Smith, 18 years old, was found April 2nd, 1984.
Dolores Laverne Williams, 17, found March 31st, 1984.
Gail Lynn Matthews, 23. Her body was found September 18th, 1983.
Andrea M. Childers, 19. Her body was found October 11th, 1989.
Sandra K. Gabbert, 17 years old, was found April 1st, 1984.
Kimmy Kai Pitzer, 16 years old. Her body was found December the 15th, 1983.
Marie Malvar, 18 years old. Her body was found on September 26, 2003.
Carol Ann Christensen, 21 years old. Her body was found May the 8th, 1983.
Martina Teresa Authorley, 18 years old. Her body was found November 14, 1984.
Cheryl Lee Wims, 18 years old. Her body was found March 22nd, 1984.
Yvonne Shelley Antosh, 19 years old. Her body was found October 15, 1983.
Carrie Ann Royce, 15. Her body was found March the 10th, 1985.
Constance Elizabeth Naun, 19 years old. Her body was found October 27, 1983.
Kelly Marie Ware, 22 years old. Her body was found October the 29th, 1983.
Tina Marie Thompson, 21 years old. Her body was found April 20th, 1984.
April Dawn Butram, 16, found August 30th, 2003.
Debbie Mae Abernathy, 26 years old. Her body was found March 31st, 1984.
Tracy Ann Winston, 19 years old. Her body was found March 27th, 1986.
Maureen Sue Feeney, 19 years old. Her body was found May 2nd, 1986.
Mary Sue Bellow, 25 years old. Her body was found October the 12th, 1984.
Pammy Annette Event, 15 years old. Her body was found August 16th, 2003.
Delise Louise Plager, 22. Her body was found February the 14th, 1984.
Kimberly L. Nelson, 21. Her body was found June 14th, 1986.
Lisa Yates, 19 years old, found deceased March 13th, 1984.
Mary Exetta West, 16 years old. Her body was found September 8th, 1985.
Cindy Ann Smith, 17 years old, found June 27th, 1987.
Patricia Michelle Barzak, 19 years old, was found February 3rd, 1993.
Roberta Joseph Hayes, 21 years old. Her body was found September 11th, 1991.
Marta Reeves, 36 years old. Her body was found September 20th, 1990.
Patricia Yellowrobe, 38. Her body was found August 6th, 1998.
Unidentified white female Jane Doe B10. Her body was found on March 21st, 1984.
Unidentified white female Jane Doe B17, who would have been 14 to 18 years old. Her body was found January the 2nd, 1986.
Unidentified female Jane Doe B20, who was between the ages of 13 to 24, was found on August 21st, 2003. Now, we did just name off 49 names, which took us a while, but honestly, it kind of hit me after I read that. It's like, that just took a while. You guys are listening, so you probably just listened to that for a while, but imagine that is a lot of people. And there are 14 bodies that were not able to be genetically linked to Ridgway and that he never admitted to, but those are also his suspected victims.
And you know what strikes me about a lot of them is how young they are.
Yeah, they're all between the ages, most of them, it's like 14 to 18.
Yeah.
You could tell at the end, towards the end of his killing, he almost he probably preferred younger, but he didn't care really towards the end.
Well, he had to get home before Judy got mad that he wasn't home for dinner.
Yeah. As we come to the end of this episode, we wanted to take a second, obviously we just read all those names off and, that kind of changed the mood. We bring you true crime cases and, we can kind of like banter jokingly through them just because that's how we are, not everybody's like that. But that one, just the
sheer number.
Yeah, and again, like I said, it's someone that you really wouldn't even expect.
Just like a regular old slow dad cruising around through a normal job and a normal life with a normal family. And he was one of the most prolific serial killers ever known to man. And I really, really sincerely hope that we don't ever see a serial killer in the future that kills as many people as Gary Ridgway did.
No, hopefully we are now open to working through our childhood traumas and not projecting them onto people where you're taking the shit you went through and causing other people like pain and death and projecting all of your pain and trauma onto other people. So,
and if that doesn't do it, the new age therapy, just remember, your second cousin could go do an ancestry DNA kit and you'll be caught. So
don't rape or murder anybody.
Exactly.
Because it's 2021, bitches, and you gonna get caught.
Very quickly. Not in 20 years.
No, because it's 2021. So they gonna keep that DNA.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening to part 2 of The Green River Killer.
We will have another case for you. It is gonna be episode 12 already. Mom, what you got in store for us?
It's a surprise.
Okay.
Because I haven't figured it out yet. But it will be a good one, I promise. And I will do some diligent research in the coming days. And I will get back to you guys and break the suspense in 2 more weeks.
Woohoo! Speaking of suspense, I don't know if any of you true crime fanatics have heard that the Night Stalker is on Netflix now. They have a Night Stalker documentary.
And it's coming out today.
Well, it came out 2 days ago. Remember, actually, we're recording on a Wednesday today, which is... Oh, wait, it came out yesterday.
Yeah. Well, Tanika's got a lot of editing to do in one day this week.
So, yeah, if you guys, to kill time in between, you could watch the...
Night Stalker documentary.
Doc. Imagine that's what case you choose.
And it's word for word exactly the documentary because I'm just sitting there recording it as I watch it.
No, well, that's okay. So join us in 2 more weeks for another episode of Murder with My Mother,
where my daughter talks murder with
her mother. Wait. Okay.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Have a good one. But not too good.